Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Arena. I am Cari Champion. Today's show, we are focusing on mental health. We've made it our priority, especially with this platform, to let athletes know they can talk about activism, but we also want to make sure we check in. And what we mean by that is just a simple, how are you doing? How are they doing? And with that, I introduce my co-host, Kyle Korver. Thank you so much for coming back. And Super Bowl champion Victor Cruz in the house. Good to see you, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to say this, Victor, when you knew the show was specifically about mental health, you wanted to be here, you wanted to share your story. I thought that was so important because oftentimes we forget that the athletes are also paying a price, if you will, in so many different ways as they entertain us, as they play on the field while everyone is dealing with so much going on in society. You all continue to move on, especially during COVID-19. So, Victor, I'll start with you because we're just going to have a very candid and real conversation. There's such a stigma and shame associated with mental health. Yet and still, we're seeing so many athletes come out and talk about their problems with it. It's becoming more and more common. You specifically, during this summer of racial reckoning, had to deal with something that you felt was really pressurized because your mental health was pressed by it. So tell us more.
Yeah, it was a real moment for me, mainly because, you know, as the Black Lives Matter movement is ongoing in that moment, I believe it was the George Floyd protests and things like that that were going on. I'm starting to feel kind of the weight of it in that moment, right? I'm starting to see what's going on. And then I remember that very next morning, or actually rewind, that night, I remember feeling those emotions, looking at my TV screen, seeing the protest, seeing what's going on. And then I'm looking at my daughter like, oh snap, I have to explain this. Like, she doesn't know, she's looking at it, she knows what her peers and what her friends tell her, what they talk about, but she doesn't really know. Like, I had to give her the full talk, slavery, like all the way up, so she can have the full, the full story on what's going on now and how we got here, And then that next morning, I remember just feeling very heavy and just crying, going through this breakdown and feeling like, wow, like they, the people that they just don't want us here. You know what I mean? They don't want our culture here. They don't like us. They don't want us here. And we didn't do anything. We didn't ask to be here. I'm just here because Blanca and Michael, my mother and father, birthed me and brought me into this world. I didn't ask to be here. And I didn't ask for the ridicule and the things that, things that are being said my way, things that are being said to not just myself, but my peers. You know what I mean? And that really weighed on me to the point where, I was calling a lot of my friends that are very prominent and make money off of the culture, right? Off of the Black African-American culture. And I'm like, man, I'm not seeing the love. I'm not seeing it. I'm not feeling it. I kept my mouth closed before, but I want to feel that love now. I want to make sure you understand my plight and what I'm going through on a daily basis. And they understood that. Them being the good friends that they were, really sat down and talked to me and really voiced their opinions, and we had a conversation. And I think, that was beneficial for me to kind of get that out, not even knowing that I had that on me until that next morning. It all kind of weighed and barreled down on me. And I just, I'm thankful for getting through that, getting over that hump, and being able to sit here on this show and talk about it now. And I'm grateful for my daughter having a better understanding of it because, I want her to grow up understanding what this world is like and how to navigate it in her own right.
It's interesting, you said you didn't know what it was, and later on we'll have a doctor join us. He's a psychologist. I think there are so many symptoms that people overlook that really, truly are triggers that say, I really need to talk to a therapist. I'm having some sort of mental health breakdown or a crisis. And I know, Kyle, you have a very specific story. You were there when Kevin Love wrote his letter, that open letter, about what he was dealing with. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, none of us really knew what Kevin was dealing with, and we didn't know that he was going to post a letter that he did. He was really nervous about it, but I was sitting next to him on the bus after it had come out, and I remember just looking at his eyes and him he was getting all these emails back and these responses back. And I think he was really nervous to put that out there. He had no idea how he was going to connect with so many people in that moment. And I think as athletes, it's really important for us to tell our stories because we all have them. How do we normalize this conversation? How do we make this, hey, if you break your arm, you put a cast on it, right? This is just really simple, right? If you have something going on in your life, you need to deal with it. But a lot of us don't know how, and we feel embarrassed about that. And so how do we make this more normal? And to watching Kevin, listening to you, DeMar DeRozan, watching some of these guys step out, I think has been really, really powerful.
You said something in our meeting earlier today that I thought was special, that therapy isn't something people should be ashamed of. You highly recommend it. Talk about being an advocate for that.
I mean, I just think obviously, when we deal with trauma and we deal with a lot of things that happen to us in life, like when we're broken, we're feeling low, we need help. But even when you're not, like, how do you feel optimal? How do you get to your peak performance? Like, how do you be the best version of you? Like, we need help in that. And so I think no matter where you're at in life, I think for me, I started going to therapy about 3 years ago. I do an intensive every year. You know, this is something that me and my wife, like, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in our parenting, whether it's in our health, like, well, this is something that we're always talking about. And it's been so helpful and freeing for me.
Therapy's changed my life. And Vic, I know you talked about it too. Therapy is a place in which you go and you don't necessarily have to figure it out, but you can talk it through.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's really helped me interact with different people more. And I know, Victor, you too have talked about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and one thing going back to the therapy thing is, like, as a culture growing up, you're just always like, I don't need to talk to anyone. I can handle it. That was like, it was like soft if you needed to sit and talk to someone about your feelings. You know what I mean? But in turn, when you do have those conversations and you do have those talks, that's what it's about. That's what that's what helps you get through these things and get you over the hump, so to speak. So I'm just a huge advocate for therapy, a huge advocate for you talking your feelings through with someone. Trust me, it's not beneath you. It's not soft. Real men go to therapy too.
I love it. I love it. Well, in that same vein, and let's leave it right there, in that same vein, the Indiana Pacers announced Monday that the assistant coach, Bill Bayno, resigned for personal and health reasons. Bayno recently took a leave of absence, and according to reports, he was struggling with the recent deaths of both his parents, as well as what has been going on with social unrest. Meanwhile, I don't know if you saw this last night, but let's talk about it. Minnesota Timberwolves center Karl Anthony Towns, he returned to the court Wednesday for the very first time since testing positive for COVID-19 mid-January. Here's the background on his story, though. You know he's been grieving because he lost his mother and 6 other family members from complications due to COVID-19, which is, I mean, just think about that for a moment. After the game, he was asked about his experience and what was it like mentally trying to take care of himself during this time.
Like I said, there's just such mental strain during all this time and a feeling of guilt because of the resources I have, and I wish I could spread these resources with as many people as possible. Guilt, just a lot of demons I haven't dealt with that I've put to the back burner for basketball, but basketball was now taken away from me completely. My teammates were taken away from me completely. People were taken away from me completely. It's just you in that house. I knew it was going to be a long journey. I knew it was going to be a rough journey. Put to the forefront that there's things I haven't dealt with and still grieving and stuff that I had to deal with now in silence with no one around to help me with that process. So, mental health is real, and it's very, very real. And I've dealt with it my whole life, and I'm glad that I had my mother with me because she always just knew how to heal me in that mental aspect. And obviously with her not here, it's even more challenging, but she gave me a lot of tools. So I just utilized them as best as I could, even in the bad days, and found a way to push through and get to this point.
Whether he knows it or not, we want to give a shout out to Karl Anthony Towns. What he said there was so important, and you can't even imagine what he's dealing with. He lost his mother and 6 other family members, and he talks about how mental health it's imperative, and you have to take care of yourself, and that's what he's doing right now. I hope, in fact, his words encouraged others. Coming up after the break, though, stay with us. America's psychologist, if you will, Dr. Jeff Gardere, will join us on the arena and to give us some tangible tips to talk about mental health and what we should be doing. Back in a moment, folks. Welcome back to the arena. Mental health by the numbers. Take a look at that. While focusing on mental health, we thought it would be important to bring in a professional who deals with mental health in an effort to get some real tangible ways to help those who are struggling in America. Studies suggest 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 6 teens are struggling with mental health. Let's welcome in Dr. Jeff Gardere. Thank you so much for being here. Again, we decided to make this show focus on mental health because there is such a stigma surrounding it. We talked about it earlier, and I was hoping that you could explain COVID-19. What are symptoms and signs that a person is struggling with mental health?
Well, obviously, if there is a situation where they're becoming isolated, they don't want to talk to people around them, they're having problems communicating a lot of the issues that they're dealing with. Sometimes they're very angry, very irritable. But really the key sign is they can't take care of their day-to-day duties, whether those be interpersonal, whether those be professional. They are just not functioning any longer.
Now, what do you mean their day-to-day duties, such as I can't get up and, I don't know, go to the store, take care of my family? What do you mean by that?
Exactly. Can't take care of my family, can't get through the workday. Even if they're able to go to work or they're working from home, they're unable to get their tasks done. They're completely unproductive. And I think we've seen with some of our athletes, the inability to focus on the game. Having interpersonal issues that may lead to substance abuse or even domestic violence. Those are all key signs that someone is in need of mental health care.
All right, you say athletes, let's focus on that. I can go down a list that we've even seen this year who had to take mental breaks, whether that be Kyrie, or we know that Andrew Luck retired from the NFL early because he just couldn't take care of himself mentally. Talk to me about what the leagues can do to try to protect their athletes, especially during COVID-19, because this is a different type of isolation that is actually being put on different athletes, and yet and still they're required to play the game and entertain us.
Well, that's right. And it's not just about keeping them in a bubble and keeping them physically safe. Of course, that's part of it when you look at the mind-body connection. But more than anything else, it's about listening to what their emotions are, what are their feelings, how do they experience having to be isolated away from their families, not playing, with fans the way that they're used to seeing them in those sorts of numbers. And also, how is it affecting their relationships, their day-to-day lives, to have to deal with avoiding COVID? And as we saw with Karl Anthony Towns, how do you deal with having COVID, people now feeling isolated from you? You have to isolate yourself, or God forbid, someone in your family becomes very sick and dying. You can't just throw that person back onto the basketball court or, into a football arena and say, go ahead and play and tell us about it later. It's about getting them therapy so they can talk about what that stress, what that loss, what that pressure feels like while they're performing for millions of people around the world. But at home, they feel like emotionally that they're dying.
Doctor, I would talk to you about trauma for a minute. It's something that I've been trying to learn quite a bit about. We all deal with this at some point in our lives. Oftentimes in sports, we'll try to work harder or achieve more and think that somehow that's going to neutralize the trauma that we've been through. Can you talk a bit about that and how important it is to recognize the trauma in our lives and deal with it, not just for ourselves, but also for our children and the generations to come, how that can possibly be passed along?
And Kyle, thank you for asking that question because it's so important. I think what we see with a lot of professional athletes, they think that perhaps if they can just keep on playing productively, or they can keep making the big money or keep getting the endorsements, staying in their professions and being vital in that way, that can erase the trauma. But it doesn't. What happens with that trauma is it does diminish them with regard to their athletic skills, but psychologically, because we know that sports is 90% psychological. It truly is. And so it's important that they talk about the trauma. It's important that they recognize how keeping that trauma inside and not discussing it really does take away from who they are as individuals, as athletes, but also as partners and family people. So if they don't address that trauma, they're going to end up taking it out on their own families. And then we see that cyclical curse continue on and on. So someone has to break that, and you break that by going to therapy, something that you talked about earlier.
I love that, Doc, talking about breaking that cycle. A little earlier, I talked about in my community, and predominantly in the African-American community, I feel like there's, it's soft to have a therapist. It's soft to be able to talk to someone about your feelings. Can you talk about how you're getting rid of the stigmas, or how you help get rid of the stigmas behind therapy and sitting down with someone and discussing your feelings?
Well, I provide the services, but it's people like you, Victor, and a lot of the younger generation who are seeing the importance of mental health, not around mental illness, but mental health, that it needs to be part of the development of an individual to be the best person that they can be. And you're right, in the Black and brown community, there's always been a stigma around talking about mental health issues, about mental illness, about mental health challenges. And I like that term because we all have mental health challenges. But more and more, we're seeing the younger generation saying it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to talk about your feelings. It only makes you a better person. It only makes you stronger, and it keeps you from being isolated.
Okay, so Doc, you just mentioned isolation, and I have to talk about COVID-19, not just athletes, but everyone in this pandemic dealing with how to survive. Sometimes they have to choose between actually going to work and staying alive, literally staying alive. I could only imagine, and I want to know what you have been able to find out in terms of studies and perhaps just recent reports. What is it looking like now, especially since we're dealing with this pandemic, and how are we asking Americans specifically to and I don't know if the word is survive, but how are we asking them to cope with what's happening in our world today?
Well, I think what we're not doing is that we're not giving them the proper information and leadership from the past 4 years. Now, we see something different with President Biden, of course, but, it was politicized, saying that you don't have to wear masks. It's okay to not social distance. And look, even athletes, they are people too. And some of them were buying into that, drinking that Kool-Aid. So now more than ever, if we're telling people, look, you've got to wear your masks, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to take care of yourselves, but you also, with the social distancing, you have to stay more connected with the people that you love, with your community, with your family. It's important to be able to talk about the pressures of staying COVID-free and being productive. And if you get COVID, how your family can support you emotionally in coming back into the game.
That's key. Stay connected with your family and your friends. Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and staying connected with us. We appreciate that. We also want to let the folks know at home, if you suffer from mental illness and need information, please visit the Alliance on Mental Health at AMI.org or text NAMI, I'll get that out, at 741-741. Take a look at this tweet we got, guys. Accidentally landed, well, I don't know why it's an accident, but I'm glad you did. Accidentally landed on the arena and stay for the important conversation about mental health. Awesome to see this discussion on this platform. I appreciate you, Dr. Kelly, making sure you stay tuned with us. Stick around. We got more with Victor Cruz and Kyle Korver. We're discussing the national anthem when we return. Kyle, you got something to say? We're gonna wait, maybe, afterwards. You got something to say? Who makes that jacket?
What's that?
Who makes that jacket?
A guy named Neil.
Okay, I know. Hey guys, welcome back to the arena. Getting ready. That is Jimmy Butler. Looking nice. What's he wearing, resident stylist reporter?
He's going team issue gear, Miami Heat gear right here. I love it. Keeping it casual.
All right, I like it. And he's taking on, obviously, the Rockets. What's your boy John Wall rocking?
I'm almost positive that's an Amiri hoodie. I could be wrong, but the Louis Vuitton sneakers, I can spot those from a mile away. I do this, Cari, you know that.
And I hate to even question you. That was disrespectful of me to question you. Meanwhile, let's talk about this. According to reports earlier this season, Dallas Mavericks and Mark Cuban made the decision to stop playing the national anthem before home games after consulting with the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver. The Mavericks did not announce that policy, but they just did it on their own. Well, Obviously now, folks are being allowed into the arenas, and by folks, I mean fans. So this is what the NBA has said. On Wednesday, the NBA made this statement regarding the anthem. With NBA teams now in the process of welcoming fans back into their arenas, all teams will play the national anthem in keeping with long-standing league policy. Well, Mark Cuban has said yes, they will play the anthem. They played it last night in their game, and he gave this statement, which essentially said, we respect and always have respected the passion people have for the anthem and our country. And I'll scroll down. He says, only then can we move forward and have courageous conversations that move this country forward and find what unites us. He wants us to have that same energy when we're having these uncomfortable conversations like we're going to have in this moment. So we thought, why not? Why not throw this question out there? Should the national anthem be played at all sporting events? Is it mandatory? Now, before we have this conversation, I want to be very, very clear. The national anthem for all of us, and we've discussed this, whether we want it played or not, does not mean we are disrespecting the military. We respect our veterans. We respect that they have fought for us and given us the right to choose this freedom and this liberty. The national anthem for us is not about the military aspect of it. So please know that we want to respect our veterans. But with that being said, talk to me about your thoughts on the anthem.
Well, I think first, my father-in-law served in the military and has a Purple Heart for what he did. I have the most respect for him and all the military. I think this is an important conversation for us to have right now. I think so for me, I have stood for the national anthem thousands of times, right? And when I watch the Olympics and I hear the national anthem, I always saw people having these like amazing moments, right? Just like tear and pride for their country. And I was always like, I want to have one of those moments. I've listened to the anthem, I've stood for it, and I honor it, and I do it proudly and because I love it. I've done it thousands of times, but I've never had that moment until the bubble. When I knelt with my teammates, I was emotional. And I was honoring the flag. I was kneeling, but I was honoring the flag because I honor the ideals of our country are built on. They are beautiful ideals, but they don't necessarily reflect our history. They don't reflect our current circumstances. And so that's why we have to have these conversations, because there's a whole lot of Americans who don't feel that way. And we can't tell them that their voice and their thoughts don't matter, right? So do we have answers right now? I don't know. I think we're trying to figure this out, but these are important conversations to be had. But I will say that when I was kneeling in the bubble, there was nothing, I was not being disrespectful by any means. But I felt like I was saying in that moment, I want these ideals, I want these men next to me to live in the same country and feel the same country and experience the same country that I do. And that brought me to tears. That was a powerful moment for me. And if that's the anthem, like if we all feel the same way about that anthem, then the anthem is beautiful. Yeah. But if we're not all feeling the same way, then we got to have some conversations, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's the key. I mean, to piggyback you, Kyle, that's the key, is the fact that everyone doesn't feel that way. And obviously, like you said, you've heard the anthem a million times because you've played a million basketball games over your lifespan, right? So you've heard it a million times, and you've just, I think because it's been cultured in us to hear that song, understand it, hear the words of it, we memorize it solely because we've heard it a million times, but it doesn't reflect what's going on in today's society. It doesn't affect the history, like you said, and it doesn't affect what's going on right now in this very moment as well. So, like, do I care about the national anthem being played? No, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Does it affect me? Is it going to change the pace or the course of my day if I start the game hearing the national anthem or not? Probably not. But do I want it to embody the things that I wish this country stood for right now? Absolutely. Unfortunately, the things that are being said in that song aren't indicative of the world that we live in, and that's the disconnect. And also another thing, it feels like if I was a player in the NBA and you take away the national anthem and you don't want, it feels like that was used as such a platform, right? You guys were kneeling during the night. It was used as a platform for players to put themselves on that map and say, here's what we're standing for. And it feels like when you take that away, you take away that platform for the players. And that's not necessarily how I wouldn't feel right like that. You know what I mean? If I was a player, I would feel a little indifferent about it because I felt like that was a platform, whether people liked it or not, a platform that we would use to show what we stood for.
Wait, say that again. What do you mean? It was a platform used for what specifically?
Well, when they were kneeling, the national anthem was being played. When players are out there on the field and showing that they, are against the way the country's being run at the moment, or police brutality, or the way African Americans are being treated in this country, they would use it. They would use the national anthem to kneel, or to put a fist in the air, or to have that moment to represent and pick a side on who they're choosing and what they believe in. And part of it, taking that away from the players, it feels like you're taking a small platform, a platform on it's not the entire game, but you're taking something away. At least that's how I feel.
It's a big question, and saying should the anthem be played at sporting events isn't yes or no. And Kyle, I'll leave you with the last word before we close. Is there an alternative?
Well, there could be. This is why we're having these conversations. I think that it is important that we do not see America as a finished product. Right? This country can be better. This country can represent everyone better, and that's the goal. And if we put so much pressure on this song right now. Does this song really represent us like that? For some people it does, and we need to honor that as well, right? But I just think our country is not a finished product. We can keep getting better. We can keep on growing.
Yes.
We can keep on including everyone in the conversation, and that's the ideals of our country.
In short, tradition can be modified. History can be changed.
And now's the perfect time.
Yeah.
Now's the perfect time to rebuild. Look where we are. Now we have the ability to set the right foundation for our country moving forward.
All right.
We're in a perfect position.
With that being said, we got one last word here. Just got chills listening to Kyle Korver speak about the national anthem. That is true. That's how I felt. Kyle, thank you for sharing that story. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. You have been nothing short of excellent, my friend.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Arena. Guess what? The Arena returns next Thursday, 6:30. You do not want to miss it because we got a special guest, Killer Mike. And Senator Cory Booker will be joining us. For now, Ernie, Chuck, Shaq, and Channing Frye sitting in for Kenny. That's next at the CarMax pregame show. Take care, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Killer Mike, I might have to come back.
No, we don't want you back. We don't want you back. We don't want you back. We don't want you back.